1971, an airplane with 92 passengers on board disappeared over the Amazon jungle. During the flight, lightning struck him. The rescue team did not manage to land. They circled over the crash site, and it was obvious that there were no survivors in such a disaster. The plane crashed from a height of 3,200 meters and broke into pieces. All 86 passengers and 6 crew members were declared dead. However, after 10 days, a girl emerged from the jungle, the only survivor in this terrible accident. For 2 decades in the 1960s and 70s, Lancer National Airlines suffered several accidents, killing more than 200 people. So, in 1966, the Lancer 501 plane crashed in the mountains. All 49 people on board died. In less than 4 years, the Lancer 502 crashed under similar circumstances. There were 100 people on board, and 2 more died on the ground from debris in the fall. So when the Lancer 508 crashed in December 1971 and fell in the middle of a completely impenetrable jungle, the rescuers were sure that there were no survivors. On board this aircraft were 6 crew members and 86 passengers, among whom was ornithologist Maria Kopke from Germany and her 17-year-old daughter Julie Ann Kopke, who had literally celebrated her graduation at school just the day before. They both flew to the city of Pucallpa to meet Mary's husband, Juliana's dad, goldsmith Hans Wilhelm Kopke, who conducted research in the Amazonian jungle. 40 minutes after takeoff, the crew saw a thunderstorm in front of them and decided to follow through. Alas, it was because of this decision that a catastrophe happened. Lightning struck the wing of the plane and the ship crashed down into the rainforests. A heavy rain was extinguished by the fire that had arisen, and the plane itself fell apart in the air when it fell, so that falling down, the relatively small parts of the aircraft were completely invisible from the air under the dense crown of trees. Subsequently, rescue teams often circled over this place, but they could not determine exactly where the plane fell. Juliana woke up, still clinging to her chair. The clock on her hand showed 9 in the morning, which meant that she was unconscious for almost a day. The girl was alive, but by no means unharmed. Her collarbone was badly damaged, swelling of her eyes, numerous cuts covered her body, the most severe of them was on her leg, and a strong concussion caused the girl to lose consciousness and her very much was sick. It took Juliana a few days only to recover enough to be able to move around. In addition to a severe headache and general shock, the girl also had myopia, and her glasses were broken. Fearing to meet the poisonous snake, she threw her shoes first in front of her, and only then took a step forward. This greatly slowed her progress, but ensured her from meeting with deadly animals. However, at first the girl tried to find other survivors. She called her mother, but no one answered her. When the girl found several well-studied corpses, her hope of finding her mother alive disappeared. Juliana looked for food Wednesday the wreckage of the aircraft, but was able to find only candy. With them she went to the nearest gorge, along the bottom of which a small stream flowed. As it later became clear during the investigation, in fact, another 14 people survived that catastrophe, but all of them died on the following days before the arrival of help. The knowledge gained from her father allowed the girl not to give up and move forward. She knew that the stream would eventually lead her to the river, and somehow, along the water, sooner or later she should meet a settlement of people. Moving along the stream was much easier than through the jungle, although the likelihood of meeting poisonous snakes was also higher. Juliana's wounds, meanwhile, were festering, larvae wounding them. Unable to eat properly, the girl ate the little that seemed to her safe enough and edible. After the disaster, the girl's despair reached its climax. From exhaustion and weakness, she was ready to give up and no longer go anywhere, when suddenly Juliana saw a motorboat and a gas canister next to it by the river. Even before she realized that the boat meant there were people nearby, she hurried to the gas canister. Her father once with the help of gasoline helped their lost dog, which returned with wounds and parasites in it. It was the injured wounds and the worms piling up in them that plagued the girl most of all these days, preventing her from sleeping at night. Juliana poured gasoline on the shoulder and leg, causing the worms to crawl out. The girl began to take them out one by one and count them. She counted 35 parasites. She was afraid to go anywhere from the boat. She hoped that people should come soon, but she didn't go on a boat herself. She didn't want people to think that she had stolen the boat. Fortunately, after a few hours, the locals really came. The girl looked so terrible that they did not even immediately decide to approach her. The guest was more like some kind of forest spirit from local beliefs than a living person. Fortunately, Juliana knew not only native German, but also Spanish, so she could explain what happened to her. The men took the girl to their village, where they gave her first aid, and then took her by boat to the village where the airport was for another 7 hours to transport the victim to Pucallpa. 12 days after the disaster, Juliana finally met with her father and was able to get professional medical help. The news of the only survivor quickly spread throughout the country, and journalists began to besiege the hospital, making their way to her ward in every conceivable and unthinkable way. The girl was not very eager to tell again and again about what she had experienced. She already had to tell the police about everything that happened. In particular, it was thanks to her testimony that the rescuers eventually managed to find out the place of the plane crash. Unfortunately, when the rescue team arrived at this place, all surviving passengers had already died. In the end, Juliana followed in the footsteps of her parents. She learned to be a biologist in Germany and later returned to Peru to continue exploring the Amazonian forests. At the age of 57, she published the book How I Fell from Heaven from her recollections of that terrible catastrophe. "You know, nightmares have haunted me for a long time," recalls Juliana in an interview on the eve of the release of my biography. "For several years I still grieved for the loss of my mother and all those people who died that day. I thought, why I was the only one who survived. These thoughts haunted me for years. Yes, and probably will always haunt." A year later, in 1972, another tragedy occurred, which was destined to go down in history. The plane that transported the rugby team from Uruguay to Chile crashed in the snowy Andes. Of the 45 people on board, 12 lost their lives right away, and 5 more died the next day. The rest awaited a cruel fate.